40 years ago, Manchester United stepped out for their first great European night. Matt Busby had dragged English football into a new era, the start of an incredible journey of first tragedy and finally triumph. Liverpool began their own adventure. The club created by Bill Shankly became the giants of Europe under Bob Paisley. A decade of glory brought pride to the city, tarnished by disaster. This is history told by those who made it and those who saw the Reds in Europe.
In one of the fiercest raids of the German blitzkrieg on Britain, a storm of bombs wreaked havoc in this proud city.
It was not an easy assignment. The ground had been blitzed. They had an overdraft at the bank. What is more, I had no experience as a manager. All I had, apart from playing experience, were certain ideas as to what the manager should do, faith in those ideas, and faith in the future of the club.
Busby's big idea was to create a family at the club. There would be no divisions. The players would respect Matt, and he would respect them. It would begin young. Ronnie Cope was a schoolboy international.
I was playing on the local playing fields one night, and my sister came up and said, "You've got to come home." Dad said so. And I got home, and there was this little Austin 7 outside the house with thousands of kids around it. And I'd never seen a car in our street, you see. And I went in, and Sir Matt Busby was there, and my dad said, "You're signing for Manchester United." And I just couldn't believe it.
But Manchester United had this great reputation, and they were good at the job. Jimmy Murphy, you know, they were really good coaches, and individual coaching. That's what I got at Manchester United when I first started when I was 15. They would take me away to the side and explain things about how the game was won and how to get the best out of your team, how to get the best out of yourself. And that's what was at Manchester United that wasn't at other clubs, really.
In the past, players waited years before getting a shot at the big time. Now it was different. If you were good enough, you were old enough. The press dubbed them the Busby Babes.
Outside left, David Pegg is on the move straight from the restart. Then tries again. Over to Bobby Charlton, who slams it home. Stankovic would cut through the defence line like a knife through butter. He centres, it bounces off Taylor, and Whelan makes sure.
Manchester's Violet goes through, and it's a goal. Jones gives Carmelo a bump.
But the Babes are quite unruffled. Eddie Coleman tries to start a Manchester attack. Manchester fans are wild with joy, but there's more to come.
Times were hard and harsh, and going to watch Manchester United was like a freedom. You know, it got you away from the toils and the torments. I mean, we was living in Colliers in old decrepit houses that was full of rats and everything, honestly. And it should have been demolished years and years ago. And our fathers went to fight in the war, and he was told that there was a better life for them afterwards. There was no better life for us at all. So you were still living in those times. And then going to watch Manchester United was absolutely... It took you away, you forgot all your problems, all your troubles and everything.
Manchester United, a bunch of bouncing Busby babes, they deserve to be knighted. If ever they're playing in your town, you must get to that football ground. Take a lesson, come to see football taught by Matt Busby and Manchester. Manchester United, a bunch of bouncing Busby babes, they deserve to be knighted.
On the pitch, they were a sensation. But off it, the players enjoyed the lives of any young single lads. In the 50s, players were not well paid, so most of them lived together in club lodgings.
I think there were about 5 lived with Mrs. Watson, like a big family. I mean, newspapers took photographs of them washing up, and we used to laugh about it, because none of them had ever washed the pot or taken the tea towel or anything like that. It was just that they'd put them in their hand to take photographs.
Every young kid at that time wanted to look like David Pegg. He was like a Tony Curtis type. You know, Tony Curtis was a big film star in the day, a lovely looking fella. Everyone used to say, oh, I'm going to get a Tony Curtis haircut. Well, they used to say when you go to the barbers, can you have a David Pegg haircut, like, you know what I mean?
They all had Vauxhall Victors that looked very much like American cars. And our Dave had a powder blue one, and Tommy had a dark blue one, and I think Bobby's was a red one. And they all used to come home individually in the 3 cars and park them in our street. And so we were magnificent having 3 cars around. Everybody was really jealous, you know. They used to come on a Saturday after the game and go to the local dance and do the best they could to pick up any of the birds that were around, you know. Actually, they were quite successful most of the time.
But David Pegg was cultured. He did things that we all tried to do but couldn't do. And he looked like what we all wanted to look like. And he used to pull all the girls, and we used to see him in the plaza here, and everyone say, oh, look at that big-headed swine, he's messing about with all these girls, you got all the girls, we can't. We had to just get whatever we could, you know what I mean? It was things like that. Marvellous, honestly.
There might have been only a few years between all of them, but like a boys' club, the younger ones knew who was boss.
Mark Jones was the one with respect because he told us how to behave. And he smoked a pipe, we couldn't believe it. And he was only 23. And we used to see them walking in town when we were getting the all-night bus from Piccadilly. There'd be Bobby Charlton, Eddie Coleman, myself, at the bus stop there, and we'd see them and we'd duck out of the way because they were a bit older than us and perhaps we shouldn't have been out, even though they were only 21 or 22 themselves.
I'll never forget the first time we went to the pictures. I thought, from courtesy, I was very thrilled that they'd asked me to go to the pictures with them, and we went to the Gaumont in Manchester on Oxford Street. And I was quite flattered that they'd asked me to go because they were first-team players. So I offered to pay for the tickets. I didn't realise how much they were, you know. And my whole wages went one night to the pictures. But I didn't care. They were good pals, good pals.
The inspiration of assistant Jimmy Murphy and Matt's faith in his young players brought immediate success. They won the league in 1956 with a team whose average age was just 22. But Busby had set his sights on a greater goal, Europe.
The Hungarian champions Honvéd challenge Wolverhampton Wanderers at the Molyneux Ground, Wolverhampton. Now they're off on the raid that brings the first incident of the match. Budai, number 7, and Flowers give chase. The ball wraps Flowers' hand, and referee Griffiths awards a free kick to Hungary. Puskas takes the kick and Coxis heads it home. 2-0 is the half-time score. Kovacs obstructs Hancock's in the penalty area. A penalty, says the ref. 2-1, and Wolves are coming back with a vengeance. Now out to the left wing. 2-all. 2 minutes later, and Smith races down the left wing. Then he makes a perfect pass to Swinburne, who cracks in his second goal. Wolves have licked the greatest club side in the world.
It was only a friendly, but the victory had the press crowing about English football supremacy. A French journalist, Gabriel Annaud, suggested a European Cup as a true test. The great Real Madrid duly won the first trophy in 1955, but no English club took part. Chelsea had declined their invitation after pressure from Alan Hardacre and the Football League.
The Football League at that time was run by people like Eurosceptics. They couldn't see any point. As far as they were concerned, the best footballers in the world were English, and the best team in the world was English. And it just wasn't true.
Busby had seen the future, and it was abroad. He was determined to take United into Europe the following season, and the FA supported him. In particular, the England manager.
How important do you think it is to our international future?
I think this is tremendously important. It's giving us the opportunity of playing in a competition, not just friendlies, against European opposition. This, I figure, is important. There's different styles, different techniques, and our players have got to get used to this.
The league was unmoved. They argued that the European Cup would interfere with United's domestic commitments. Secretary Fred Howarth wrote to the club stating that participation is not in the best interests of the league as a whole, and demanding that you reconsider your decision to participate in the light of its possible effect on attendances. It was unthinkable to defy such demands, but that's exactly what Busby did.
He wanted Manchester United to become England's Real Madrid, and that was his dream. He saw Real Madrid as a great side. He often talked about the great players there, and he felt that an English club should be in Europe, and the Football League didn't want that to happen, and he went against them and said, well, punish us if you will, and went in.
And Europe would bring other rewards.
Busby always gave you the impression of being a soft touch, but when it mattered, he wasn't. He was a hard man. And I think it suddenly dawned on them that this could be a cask of gold. Not only were you learning new things, but you were creating a new conception of the game, and your club was also getting more money out of it.
The youth team had been abroad before, but to supporters it was another world.
An holiday was a day out at Blackpool or going Queen's Park with a bottle of water and a jam butter. You couldn't afford holidays. And continental holidays, Christ above, that was never even, you never even thought of it. That was like a million miles away.
Europe was different. And it was an adventure, it was a national thing. It wasn't just the club, you know. It was sort of representing the country. It was just paradise, it was.
The idea of being able to see other famous cities and to be covered in football, which I love, you couldn't ask for a better job than that. And the difference in reporting soccer then as now is that we went as the eyes and ears of the people who were not there.
Well, you'd get this report on, and a fella'd come on and you'd hear it, you know, doing the hello, and Manchester United are doing it, you know, and you could be even in the picture house, all right, and it'd flash up on the screen.
We had a local cinema called the Don, and yeah, it was great to see them in massive size playing. Yeah, and everybody that knew us, of course, used to say, we saw your Dave in the news and that sort of thing. Yeah, it was lovely.
10-minute pathing newsreel used to give you something like 2 minutes, of which 1 minute was showing you the crowd, waving rattles and doing mysterious things like eating pizza, which was a product that wasn't in this country. You know, there was nothing that was foreign in this country in those days. No, so you didn't see the game. You saw the goals.
And it's a goal!
The wives, they'd be watching these love stories on the films where you'd get this report on. United's got beat 5-3 and go, oh, and they'd say, come on, we're going home now, because they were so disappointed that United had got beat.
The idea of the European Cup had caught the public's imagination. The matches were a sellout. After the first leg defeat in Bilbao, Manchester was desperate to see if United could still win.
For the start, work came second place that day. There was only one thing to do, that was to get home, get to the match. Fortunately, I lived 3 doors away from the game, from the main entrance. And we just couldn't get to the game fast enough.
I was at home, and I wanted to go to the match. And my dad got home from work and gave me the story about the fact that he couldn't get a ticket, and he thought perhaps they wouldn't do so well anyway, and because we'd lost the first game 5-3.
It was impossible to take him because there were so many people. There was 80,000, if I remember, or around about that. But you can imagine a little boy, no more than 3 foot high, he wouldn't have a chance. So he just couldn't come.
And he was wanting to let me down gently, which was nice. And then off he went, and I listened.
And it was the first real exciting European Cup game that I ever remember.
I was doing my national service then, so I wasn't able to sort of go everywhere. And I remember one of my sergeant majors asked me if I was going to the match. I said, I'm not going to, I'm doing my national service. And he said, well, I've got a car, I'd like to go. He says, if you can somehow manage it, you know. I said, well, I'd love to take you. So it was CSQ White. He came from Edinburgh. And I said, okay, I can get the tickets if you'll take me up.
Floodlights at Main Road, Manchester. United must beat their opponents by 3 clear goals to reach the semi-finals of the European Cup.
I'd never seen a football match under floodlights before. And people said, oh, it'll never be the same, you know, it won't catch on, they won't like it, they won't be able to see the ball, and if they score, it won't know if it's a goal. There was all sorts of rumours going around.
4 minutes before half-time, Manchester's Violet goes through, and it's a goal.
Anybody around my age who was there will tell you, for atmosphere, you could cut it with a knife. The roar from start to finish never stopped. It just got louder and lower, but there was a roar throughout the game. And the atmosphere, there was a bit of mist around the ground, and it felt the ball was being sucked towards the goal when we had an attack. If a centre went in, it was sucked towards a United player's head so he could get a header. Balls were flashing past the post.
Manchester's second came from a free kick. Taylor doing the rest.
You could hear the shouts from Main Road over in Oldham, I believe. You know, I heard people tell me the next day, you know, I used to work on Smithfield Market, and the fellas from Oldham used to say, I heard all the roaring going on, what was going on, because they beat Bilbao 3-0.
And Manchester was set for the semi-finals.
Standing at the door in Main Road waiting for Dad to come home, these guys were filing past me, going home from the match, and there was no atmosphere. It was eerie. Because they were all, plainly, I didn't realise it because I'd not been there, but they were all so drained that they had nothing left. They had nothing left to give.
Oh, absolutely. Feeling that they had nothing left. You know, they'd spent all their force. We virtually willed them. Everybody willed them to score.
3-0. It's absolutely sensational. And then we drove straight back through the night, got back about 3 in the morning. And I can remember some of the supporters of other teams were saying, yeah, United have no chance, you know, they'll never get 3. And I went back, yeah, we got 3. But we didn't have any great in-depth tactics on how to play against them. It was all sort of trial and error, you know, and there was a lot of error to begin with. But it was something that we had to do, and the old man said, well, we have to do it. So we went and played all these wonderful teams, you know, with very attractive names, you know, Real Madrid, and it was a terrific time.
United drew Real Madrid in the semi-final, a name to fill every supporter, every player with awe.
The stadium was the first thing I noticed going over there. Tremendous stadium. I think most players want to play against the best, you know. They want to win, but there's nothing like playing against the best in the world. And for me, Real Madrid was the best club side in the world.
Sir Matt couldn't cover his admiration for Di Stefano and Hento. You know, normally they try and keep things like that quiet, you know, and otherwise it would frighten you to death. So we were there and we were playing them.
Real taught United a lesson. They won 3-1. But these were the best players in the world, men that earned 10 or 20 times as much as the babes. Life for people in Manchester was a million miles away from the glamour of these superstars, and it was incredible that they could be coming to Manchester, rainy Manchester in the north of England.
Manchester was always portrayed as wet, dingy, flat-capped, flat dialects. You know, everything was portrayed as being grey. We had to be lesser people because these were exotic people. Di Stefano, Argentinian, where's Argentina?
When Real Madrid came to Manchester, I actually travelled to the airport just to see the players arrive and get in the team coach. It was such a magical name. It was like seeing a film star.
Manchester United are at home to Real Madrid in the second leg of the European Cup semi-final.
I was looking forward to get even with Hento because he'd given me a bit of a chasing, you know. I hadn't seen anything like this before. I remember Matt did say in the team talk, he said, I might need a motorbike to get this guy.
The French referee is kept busy for plays pretty rough at times. A neat overhead kick starts Madrid on the move, and like a flash, they're up the other end with winger Copa beating Wood for a goal.
We went full of anticipation into this great game against Real Madrid at Old Trafford, 3-1 down from the first leg. And I think it was within 20 minutes or so we were 2 down.
That was the weakness of youth, wasn't it? That they didn't do what they do now, settle down and see what's happening and have everybody back and then just see how it goes and then put on the pressure. They went sailing forward.
The Red Devils keep up the attack, but they can't press it home. And when Madrid break out, inside left, Real shows how it should be done.
And we were caught, you know, we were caught on the break. Well, we didn't know anything about being caught on the break. These things were all new to us.
And he thought, oh, heck, they're going to get murdered here. But they didn't, did they? Robert Charlton took a hand.
He centres, it bounces off Taylor, and Whelan makes sure of it.
It was crazy. We were so confident that even though we were 4 goals down, we still thought we could do something. And Billy Whelan scored a goal. I scored a goal. And we had about 10 minutes left. And I can remember somebody fell over and was wasting time on trying to waste time pretending that he was injured. And Duncan Edwards picked him up. He picked him up and didn't throw him, but placed him off the pitch, you know. He did pick him, placed him off the pitch so that he didn't waste any more time.
There's an ugly scene when Torres falls after colliding with left winger Pegg. Manchester try to carry him off, and Madrid to pull him back. It's a pity that such behaviour on both sides should spoil the brilliant football which gave Real Madrid their semi-final victory.
When they got beat by Real Madrid, even me at my young age, and I wasn't a great thinker out like that, a great scholar, but I came away and I thought, oh, you know, we'll never catch these people up. And then I read an article that Matt Busby wrote and he said, oh, we'll catch these people. He must have been thinking what everybody, he said what everyone was thinking. Well, don't worry about that. Once these young lads have matured, we'll take on the world and we'll beat them.
I was approached to go to Real Madrid as manager, and Mr. Bernabeu and the officials there said, tremendous salary, and we will make a heaven for you, Madrid. And I eventually said to Mr. Bernabeu, I'm very grateful, but my heaven is here in Manchester.
United had learned a great deal from that first season in Europe. Next time, they would be better prepared tactically, and the young team was maturing and growing in confidence. Despite the league's dire warnings, they won the title again and were in Europe for a second time. But not all the lessons were learnt, or could be learnt from those first heady days abroad. The danger signs were there, but only with hindsight.
Payoff to it all, and it happened in Bilbao, where when we went to take off to come home, the wings were covered with snow. Riley, the captain of the Dakota, he refused to take off, and of course the players and even the press were lazy devils, as you know, but we gave them a hand to sweep the wings clear.
It was extremely cold, and several of the lads had to get sweeping brushes. And I've got a photograph of him, and several of them actually, sweeping ice off the aeroplane. And they had to, some of them had to sweep the runway as well to allow the aeroplane to get up to actually take off.
And we're just happy, you know, how you are at that age, and we went trundling along the runway and just straight up between the two things. Way, lads, we've made it. And I think I'm correct in saying it was exactly a year before the Munich disaster. I think it was February the 6th, 1957.
Manchester United had become the first English team to play in Europe, a new world for supporters and players.
Europe was different. It was an adventure. It was sort of representing the country. It was just paradise, it was. For atmosphere, you could cut it with a knife.
Manchester's Violet goes through, and it's a goal!
Every young kid at that time wanted to look like David Pegg.
They used to do the best they could to pick up any of the birds that were around, you know. Actually, they were quite successful most of the time.
They were good pals, good pals.
We virtually willed them. Everybody willed them to score.
Most players want to play against the best.
The idea of being able to see other famous cities and to be covered in football, you couldn't ask for a better job than that. We're just happy trundling along the runway and just straight up between the two things. Way, lads, we've made it.
I've got a photograph of him sweeping ice off the aeroplane.
In 1957, United won the league championship for the second successive year. The Busby Babes had learned from that first season in Europe. They had lost in the semi-final to a tactically superior Real Madrid, but this time it would be different. A swashbuckling win at Arsenal was the last game before the quarter-final in Belgrade. Tom Potter was the local bobby around Old Trafford. He met the club secretary just before the team flew out.
On the Sunday evening, I was on duty in Warwick Road. I was looking down the ground and I saw Walter Crickmere and his wife, and they were just coming out of the players' entrance. And I said, "A good match yesterday, Mr. Crickmere." He said, "Yes," he said, "Bobby Charlton played brilliantly." He said, "They won 5-4, you know, at Arsenal the day before." And he was overjoyed about this. So he said, "What are you doing on Thursday?" I said, "Oh, I think I'm on duty just the same." He said, "Well, if you're anywhere near the ground, about 4 o'clock, you'll see the plane coming home then."
You were going places where people couldn't go in those days, behind the Iron Curtain. And the team that went to Yugoslavia, each player, whether he going from his own home or from his digs, would have maybe a dozen hard-boiled eggs. Crazy when you think about it. A dozen hard-boiled eggs, sandwiches, cheese.
People brought little stoves with them, chocolates, anything to eat, just something that they could knock together quickly. And really the food wasn't too bad at all, really. It was okay. We always got the best of everything wherever we went. It doesn't matter which country we went to.
You would think it was a Hollywood film stars arriving, and they were absolutely captivated by it all, and they enjoyed the Manchester United style of play. They were 3 up at half-time, and they should have cakewalked it, but they decided to keep on attacking, and of course if you do that, you leave gaps at the back. They got one, and then they got a lucky penalty when Fulks struck for the ball, but the guy fell over his leg, and it's a penalty. In the modern context, you would have criticised Man United for throwing away a 3-goal lead. But they had this kind of arrogance. They went out to score goals. And that's not a bad thing, is it, really, from the spectator's point of view?
After the match, you know, the perk that you had was you were allowed to have a drink after the game, and we used to have a few drinks. We used to have more than enough drinks, I must be honest.
We went to a banquet. I remember big Mark Jones singing, and everybody putting their arms around each other, and these poor slabs watching. On Ilkley Moor, but Tat Neri was at the top of his voice. Him, Tommy Taylor and David Pegg. On Ilkley Moor, but Tat, until about 1 o'clock in the morning. The players went back to the hotel, played poker in this big hotel, where you can put your shoes outside the door for the man to come along and polish your shoes. You've really made it then. But little Eddie Coleman was going along, changing a 7 for an 8 and changing people's shoes, and until somebody said, "That's the boss's shoes you're moving." I can assure you, put them back again.
They chartered this Elizabethan because on the previous match in Prague, the British planes couldn't leave Heathrow. They flew, as I remember, to Vienna, and then Vienna into Holland, and then by cross-channel steamer, and then by train to Manchester, you see. And Busby said, "We're not having that. Next time we'll have our own plane."
It was cold on that Thursday afternoon, and I saw a couple of the reserve team lads running down to the ground, and Joe Carolyn was one of them, the full-back. And I thought they were making their way to the ground to watch this plane come and go. And I'm looking up in the sky, and a black cab driver drew up. He said, "What are you looking for, mate?" I said, "The plane's coming over." And he said, 4 o'clock. He said, "Not today, and ain't. They've crashed." He said, "They've all been killed."
On the fringe of a Munich airport lies the wreckage of an airliner, still smouldering from a crash in which 21 people were killed.
I just turned like that and I saw the end of the runway. God, you know, we're not going to make it.
Terrible rattling and crashing. bang, and something hit me in the back of the head. I thought the top of my head's been cut off, something went up my nose. And I actually thought that like an eggshell, like a boiled egg, had taken the top of my head off.
When I came round, I couldn't breathe like this, and I'd always had a good breathing, you know, and I thought, what a silly bloody way to die.
And they shouted run, and just as they shouted run, Jim Thane, Captain Jim Thane, came around what was left on one side of the cockpit with a fire extinguisher in his hand, and he shouted, run, you stupid bastard, it's going to blow.
And I ran, and I realised I had no shoes on, running in about 3 or 4 feet of snow. Then I saw what had happened.
Then I heard a child crying, and I knew that behind Frank Taylor there was a lady and a child there. And I shouted to the people, come back, there's people alive in here. They just kept going. Eventually I shouted, come back, you bastards, there's people alive in here. I don't blame them.
And then I looked down and saw my right leg was in a bit of disarray, and I did the only gentlemanly thing, I passed out.
I found a little bunny suit, a romper suit, which the child had been wearing. I seen it, pulled it out, and there was nothing in it. Thank God, I was relieved. Crawled a bit further and found the baby.
And then I saw Harry coming around the other side of the aircraft with a baby. I didn't know there was a baby on board.
Manchester United, the finest soccer team Britain has produced since the war. And 7 of them died in the crash. 10 others, as well as their famous manager, Matt Busby, were injured. Some so seriously that their lives hung in the balance.
I asked the doctor, where's everybody else? There didn't seem too many of them, you know. Are they in the other hospital? He said, no, we don't have another hospital. This is it, this is what you have left. Everybody else is dead, he said. Well, the shock hit me then. That's the first time it hit me, you know.
With them were 8 of the North's finest sporting journalists who would never see home again.
I said, where's George and Henry, all my lads? And he just pointed upstairs. He said, they're up there, you know. And I thought he meant on the 2nd floor, the floor above me. But he meant they were in heaven.
We're walking down the street and a newspaper lad said, United in plane crash. They didn't announce anything properly. It was just there are survivors that are injured in hospital.
I happened to notice on the hoarding, Munich Air Crash. And that's all it said, Munich Air Crash. And I thought, goodness me, what's happened? Got back to the office, and it was just as if the atom bomb had dropped.
This reporter came from the local paper and told us that there'd been an accident, but didn't say what kind of an accident, just that he'd had a report that there had been an accident, and we actually assumed that he'd had an accident in his car. And then, of course, we watched television and heard it on the radio.
And as the night went on, they started mentioning survivors. And I can remember saying, thank God that Bobby's all right, Dennis and Harry and Bill Folks and all these, thank God Jackie, but all the names, they only mentioned it. And I said, now where are my friends? Where are they?
According to my mother, I was apple of his eye, you know what I mean? He was a nice man. I do believe she was shopping when I think she saw it on her news board. I do believe that's how she found out like that.
During the late evening, they reported that a lot of them had been found, and so we were quite hopeful. But then, early next morning, about 6:30, they told us that David hadn't been.
It was as if somebody had thrown a great grey blanket over the city. It wasn't just Manchester United that had been struck down. We'd been struck down. It was part of our family. We'd been bereaved.
You was walking round like in a dream. You couldn't believe that this had happened. You know, all these great players that we'd worshipped, idolised, and all this has now come to an end.
There wasn't a hysteria or anything like that. It was just a quiet sadness. And the school was never so quiet You know, you'd hardly hear a sound in the school that day. They were all wearing their scarves, and we thought, well, we'd let them wear them, you know, for the day anyway, even though they weren't uniform, because they were so genuinely upset that they came in quietly into school, they went home quietly. Everyone felt it was a personal loss.
And there wasn't a sound, you know. Grown men were crying as the hearse was going by with these coffins in. And there wasn't a sound except the wheels on the road. That night, another constable and I were designated to perform duties inside the ground. And the bodies, of course, were in the gymnasium. And I didn't want to look, and yet I did look, and I cried, you know. And the other constable with me as well, he was terribly upset. And all night long, you know, we could hear people coming to the door with flowers and crying outside the place entrance door and saying prayers. All night long we could hear footsteps. Very, very sad. And I was glad when morning came. The smell of the varnish from these coffins, and it's with me till the day I die. Each time I smell varnish, it takes me back to these coffins.
I was going to Belgrade, and there was a visa stamped on my passport. And Jimmy Murphy came, pulled me to one side, and he said, "Ronnie, the boss has just been on the phone. Roger Byrne has a slight injury. He's very sorry, but Jeff Bent will take your place." Of course, I wasn't very happy, as you can imagine, because for a young player to go on a tour was fantastic with the first team. So that was that. And poor old Jeff never came back.
Matt Busby had called on those that remained to keep the flag flying. But who was there? The programme for the first game after Munich showed no United team.
The ground was packed when I arrived at about 5:30. It was a game like no other I've ever been to before or since.
Billy Fuchs wins the toss for Manchester United against Sheffield Wednesday. And it's the most dramatic game Busby's Babes have ever played.
It wasn't just about football, that game. It had got something to do with a giant of football brought to his knees and now trying to struggle off the floor and fight on.
Scratch team or no, this is straight out of the Busby mould. And make no mistake...
That night was unbelievable. No, I don't think anybody would have beaten us that night. I just do not think if we'd have played Real Madrid, they'd have beaten us that night.
When they scored, you know, people ran on the pitch, me too. And I was on duty, yeah.
Harry Gregg's a tower of strength to his youthful colleagues. Time and again he turns defence into another opening for attack. 17-year-old Mark Pearson has the ball. Alec Dawson's ready to receive, and there's number 3.
United went on to reach the FA Cup final. But more importantly, they were still in Europe and faced a tough semi-final against AC Milan. They would have to play without one of the youngest babes, Bobby Charlton. He had recovered quickly and was called up by England for his first cap against Scotland. His performance guaranteed his place for the next international. Unfortunately, it clashed with the Milan tie.
And Bobby Charlton runs in for a magnificent goal.
The FA refused to release him.
Terrible. Well, we needed Bobby. Of course, he was the leader. And they took him to play, and I think it was a friendly game. You know, I mean, that was unbelievable. And that was typical of them, you know, of the FA. Going to punish Manchester United and Matt Busby for going against their wishes or showing who is the boss or whatever. But I thought it was just absolute stupidity on their part.
But the club was lifted by Busby's return from hospital.
In spite of his injured leg, Matt is in great spirits, as happy as a schoolboy at the prospect of seeing his beloved team again.
Actually, I was terrified to come and look at the ground, the people, at that time. I remember my first reaction was never to have anything to do with football again.
team was staying at the Norbury, and I had to stop 2 or 3 times on the road, you know. He broke down every time he thought about the crash and the lads that had been killed, you know. And he said his life's work was over.
I'll never forget the first time we all met him again. We were all assembled in the dressing room, and he looked at us all. Tears came in his eyes, and he just walked out. We understood we knew what he was going through. He just was looking at faces that weren't there.
When he came back, he was on crutches, and we'd go and meet him at the door, and he'd go upstairs through the director's door, up the stair, and he would give you his crutches while he forced himself to walk down the passage using the wall, you know. Amazing. Really, really gutsy.
And there the cheers of the crowd as Matt Busby returns once again to Old Trafford and takes his usual seat, the manager's seat.
I think it said something in nature. We're all aware of what's happened. We have got to carry on and rebuild this club, this great club of ours.
He said he owed it to the lads who had died. He said for 10 years they would have mastered Europe and all English football, all European football. They had such talent, and they were all so young too.
Matt was too ill to travel to Milan. Fears about flying meant a long journey over land for the team.
Of course, we travelled by train to London, then ferry, then train, all the way to Milan. It took us a couple of days to do that.
It was just unbelievable. We weren't allowed in the ground till half an hour before the kick-off. Jimmy Murphy storming about the coach, saying that if we're not in the ground in the next 5 minutes, we turn the coach round and we're going home. We're not being treated like this.
This was different. This was hostile. This really was hostile, and I'd never experienced that. That was the first time in Europe I'd experienced this hostility. They were throwing things at the bus, and oh, it was terrible.
I mean, when they played at AC Milan, we knew that there was no hope that the team that was then was going to beat them. There was no way on. Although I think they won 2-1 the game at Old Trafford there that night. But we knew that once he went away, he'd get slaughtered, you know, because, all due respect to lads that did play, he wasn't good enough.
Real Madrid wanted to give United the European Cup in honour of those who had died. Their offer was declined.
Eintracht and fabulous Real Madrid in white.
Madrid went on to dominate Europe for 5 years. They ended in style at Hampden Park, watched by 2 young men destined to play a major part in United's revival.
I think that created the whole aura about the European Cup. The European Cup was somewhere else, it was in another country, but now it was actually in Britain, being played at Hampden Park. 127,000 people at the game, and they're all at Hampden Park to see that wonderful Real Madrid team. Absolutely magnificent. I mean, because the European Cup, God almighty, it's some trophy if you can win that, but you have to be a hell of a team to win that. It's probably the best game I've ever seen, the Real Madrid-Eintracht game at Hampden Park. And I thought, that is not the same game that we played 2 weeks ago, because the England versus Scotland game, that was awful. And this was just absolute magic. To watch the great Real Madrid playing the way that they played, you went on the pitch the following day or whatever, and we all became Di Stefanos, we all became Puscases, you know, we tried to do something, and it was different.
Busby needed men to compete with the best in Europe. He found them in Law and Crerand. But at a price. United had to break the transfer record to get them. And that wasn't the idea. It wasn't the family way.
It was a lot of money for Matt, but he couldn't wait for the youngsters to come through at that particular time because they were all too young. You know, they were in their 16s and maybe 17s. They weren't particularly ready for it. So he had to go out, and it was unusual for him to do that. But within a very short time, within a year of me being there, of course, another 17-year-old came through, didn't he?
And I'm training in a five-a-side with these kids. And this youngster comes through with the ball. And I'm down on my backside. I thought, here, Then a few minutes, the same thing happens, and here's this kid doing to me what I did to other people. He's thrown me a dummy. And the third time he did it, I said, if you do that again, I'll break your bloody neck. It's as easy as that. That was the great George Best.
I can't compare George to anybody else. And I've seen George do things with a football I've never seen anybody else do.
This is Best. Wriggling out space. What a fine save! What a fine shot! Georgie Best!
One thing George used to do, he used to purposely play a ball against a defender's legs, knowing that he'd get the rebound and knowing that his reflexes were so quick that once he got that rebound, he'd be round the player. And people used to say to me, he was lucky there, but he wasn't. He intended to do that.
George Best. Making space for his cross, and Best! And Law! There it is, 5 minutes more! Straight into the path of Charlton! That's the equaliser from Bobby Charlton!
Dennis Law and Bobby Charlton, George Best, they gave it all the star status and all that. But Crennan's passing was absolutely phenomenal. He was brilliant.
To Best. Look at this with a little bit of acceleration. Oh, what a beautiful little chance to go! Off Law!
He'd find Law in different positions, and Law would be lurking about, and all of a sudden, boom, he's gone. He's like a lightning, you know, strike a lightning, he's gone, and scoring goals and what have you.
In 1958, there was no future. Now, just 7 years after the crash, Busby had rebuilt a side good enough to win the league and a place in Europe. The holy trinity of Best, Law and Charlton revived memories of David Pegg, Duncan Edwards and all the babes. They gave hope to supporters and players who had thought their dream was over.
And then it all started. And that team that he had was a great team. I mean, they played some fantastic football. It was a ready team, ready-made team. And they played some fantastic football. And we had three of the European Players of the Year in the team, you know. How many teams have got that, ever?
There was always that unspoken feeling that the club had to win the European Cup. It wasn't talked about it. The survivors who were lucky enough to play after, not because of Munich, but because Matt Busby felt that was good, not just for Manchester United, but good for football.
It was always on your mind that the players who had survived the crash, I mean, you know, to have been involved in a crash and survived it as well, and yet still go on to play at the highest level. No, it was never out of your mind. No, it was always, and of course they didn't talk about it, and we didn't talk about it. We didn't want to hear. And of course when we went flying, you know, into Europe, I mean the plane was always very quiet.
And the thought goes back to the history of the European Cup for Man United, and the great tragedy that happened on the way. And I think the players didn't just play for themselves, the players were playing for the history. They were playing for the history of the club, really, and for the place in the annals of football history forever.
It's Leicester City against Manchester United, that galaxy of stars who have often disappointed, but who today will dazzle the football.
5 years after the Munich Air disaster, Matt Busby had a new Manchester United side, good enough to win the FA Cup. But it was a false dawn. The men that replaced the babes were different. This wasn't the happy family Matt wanted. There were divisions, player against player, old against new.
I had the reason to go and knock the boss's door on 3 occasions when we were having a nightmare. And I discovered that walking about them, a click here, and a click here, which was not part of United. And sadly, the cliques were all formed by people who'd been brought in from the outside.
We're good players, but we haven't got a good team. You know, they work, but only as for what they wanted, not for what the team wanted. And Matt knew this, and we talked about this, and he got rid of 2 or 3 as quickly as he could and changed that pattern.
Busby needed Nobby styles. He grew up with the babes and had learned how to survive in 60s soccer. But most of all, he loved Matt, loved United, and made sure everyone else did too.
They had a great football brain. People forget that about Nobby. Nobby was a great reader of the game. I'll tell you something, if you didn't made a mistake when Nobby Stiles was playing in your team, Nobby used to go, I mean, you're afraid to face the little so-and-so.
I used to daydream. I'd daydream. I'd be at Old Trafford and daydream. I've said it before. And I'd be, as the announcing the teams and say, and now they're announcing me, Norbert Stiles, you know, number 4 or something like Hollywood. And that was, I used to dream it. Fortunately enough, I lived a dream, you know. It was something that was extra special. But it was just, as I said, going into that club at that time was, it was you know, I mean, that's when George came, you know. That was when George had arrived. George was one of the greats.
This is Best.
Norbert Stiles and Georgie Best were the most unlikely double acts. But in their own way, they heralded a new era for United and for football.
What a fine shot, Georgie Best.
Now the good times were back. In 1965, United took the championship in style. But the title didn't really matter. What really mattered was the European Cup. It was why the Babes had died and why Busby came back. It was the Holy Grail. They played Benfica in the quarter-final at Old Trafford. They could only beat them by 1 goal. Everyone expected them to lose the second leg in Lisbon.
I remember going to the Stadium of Light, and I'm not sure, there was 110,000 people at the game. When we drove up to the game, we were getting plenty of abuse, in a nice way from the Portuguese fans. You know, they were very, very nice. In actual fact, the Portuguese fans, they were waving 5 to us all the way up.
And I always remember we were going to the stadium, and everybody was doing this, you know. They were all saying 5, like that's what the score's going to be, I suppose, you know.
Benfica kept United waiting, while their golden boy Eusebio was presented with the award for the European Player of the Year.
In the early days, this is foreign to you. You know, the time wasting, all the different things that they do, you know, no hot water in the shower, you know, all that type of thing, you know, cold dressing room, all the things that they would try and put you off.
We were messing about in the dressing room. Obviously, we're all geeing each other up. Jimmy and Matt got about, speaking to every player individually, and all geeing each other up and so on and so forth.
What I used to do is to get a ball against the wall and I'd jam it, tackle, make me feel, you know, tackling, just getting myself a feel of it, and slam it against the wall, jam it again, to get a feel in my boots, right, and everything. The other lads would knock the ball against the wall, getting a feel, or doing a little bit of exercises, loosening up.
So I'm kicking the ball about with something, I kicked and there was this big mirror up in the wall. I hit the mirror and I smashed the mirror to smithereens. You'd have thought I'd have shot somebody because everybody in the dressing room went so quiet.
And Harry went berserk, you know. Bad luck. And that was the best bad luck we ever had, like, you know, because... No, we went out again with the team talk. The team talk was, first 20 minutes, we're going to keep it tight. But nobody told George. Nobody told George. George just went, and he was unbelievable.
Kaluna. Oh, beautifully intercepted by Best. Great middle player, this boy is. This is Law. Because Best is scored. Best has got a goal for Manchester United.
It must have been fairly, I suppose, late at night that we were listening, because I'd actually gone to bed to listen to it. And you could just lie there and imagine yourself at the ground. I'd just close my eyes and I could see the pitch. I could see play going on. And the pictures were painted by the words of the commentator.
Best again. What a player this boy is. He's got another. 12 minutes gone and Best surely has now finished the tie.
People couldn't believe it. Apparently Busby had told them, the first 20 minutes, just defend, tuck up and don't give anything away. And this fellow went sprinting off and scored goals, and he sat smoking his pipe or something, and Jimmy Murphy nudged him. He said, I thought you told him to wait 20 minutes. He scored 3 goals. He was 3 up.
So people couldn't believe it, like, you know what I mean? And as each goal went in, and again, I can remember it distinctly, listening to it, I could not believe that it was happening. And the commentator couldn't believe it too.
This is going to be a rout.
It was all so extraordinary. It was like having another ice cream after you just had one. And then, there's no question we were going to win it. We're going to win the European Cup that year.
A lovely one to Charlton. This will be it, number 5, I should think. Oh, what a goal by Bobby Charlton. That is the pink ribbon on this luscious box of chocolate that Manchester United have given us tonight.
Everybody was saying 5, and it was, but when, on their side, you know, we got the 5, and it was one of the greatest performances, I think, in Europe that we've ever had.
A great performance by Manchester United, and Bobby Charlton had the shirt ripped off his back, and down goes Jackie Crompton.
Extraordinary scenes followed an extraordinary match. Benfica had never lost a European tie at home. Now they had been humiliated. United were supremely confident.
Given this superb exhibition.
So once we'd done that, we felt then that we were going to win the European Cup, because the teams left in it were nothing at all. And when we got drawn against Partizan Belgrade, hey, this is us.
The Partizan semi-final was strange, actually. I remember I was at a wedding that day, and the match was not on TV live, but the highlights were due to be screened later on in the evening. And the match actually took place in the afternoon. And I didn't want to know the score. I wanted to watch the match as though it were live. And I remember travelling home on the train, and by this time, people knew the score. And I managed to travel from Altrincham to Northwich and tell all the people who I travelled with on the train not to let me know the score. They all knew it. Nobody told me the score. Got home, and I remember sitting there, and it got to about 9:30 before the televised highlights came on. And there was a knock on the door. I opened it, and a mate of mine said the immortal words, "I see they've cocked up again."
And Best calls it down the middle. He's going through. Just a chance he can beat the goalkeeper. Oh my Lord, with an open goal hit the crossbar. And my goodness me, Matt having a steward is chewing on there with Jack Crompton and Jimmy Murphy with him. It's a goal! It's a goal! Scored after 65 seconds of the second half. It's a goal! Oh, beautiful goal! Now the question is, are United going to lose their third semi-final of the Champions Cup?
The answer was yes. Matt had gambled on the fitness of Best and Law, and he had lost. Partizan were better prepared and better organised. In the second leg, they defended well and held on to their lead. United were out. Once again, they'd been found wanting, and it hurt.
And I just felt at that time that we went into the game too cocky, you know, too easy. And, you know, when we got beat by them, we were so disappointed.
I was really depressed, and I think Matt was the same. You know, I think well, I'm sure he was, because I think he must have thought the same thing, that time was going by, you know, and we had a good team that year. We had a great team, you know, and we should have won more than we did.
I think Matt, to be fair, thought that was his last chance. So I remember speaking to him after the game, and he was a lot lower than we were. I mean, he didn't, as I say, he didn't show emotion a great deal, but I mean, I felt a great deal of sympathy towards him, because, as I said, he was really down in the dumps. And I said to him at the game, I said, "Boss, don't worry about it. We'll win the league next year, and we'll win the European Cup the following year." But that was only me saying that to give him a little bit of a lift.
We go in with a different attitude, a different mentality, because it was not easy to play in Europe. We didn't know how to play these teams at times, you know, and it's only a matter, you only get that through years of experience playing against them. How do we go about it? Do we defend a one-goal lead, or do we go out and try and get a second and kill the... You know, it's one of those that, it's like a game of chess.
Tactics had to come into the game, and Europe especially. because playing abroad in Europe, if you think you could go out and play like you played in England, they'll ram 3 or 4 past you just like that. And I think teams realise that, and the 60s was the time it started to change.
Wilf McGuinness had worked with the England team that won the World Cup. He was a convert to the coaching manual. But United was supposed to play off the cuff. Go out and enjoy yourselves, Busby said. Not anymore. This was work.
We're an attacking side, basically. You know, you're happier with Bobby Charlton with the ball in their half of the field than you are with Bobby on the edge of our penalty area. You know, because he wasn't a great tackler, and he could have been tattled out of the game so easily.
But suddenly, you know, players were good enough to actually handle these sort of situations. They had to find different ways of doing it. So the tactics changed. We changed different we tried different free kicks, different corner kicks, man marking, which we didn't really do very often, you know, but sometimes if the player was good enough, you'd have to man mark him.
I came in with one idea which is shown now from free kicks. We see Dennis Law running over the ball at the Stretford end, the ball being laid into, I think it was David Hurd who flicks it off, and there's Dennis Law scoring a goal, taking it round the keeper and scoring a goal from a rehearsed free kick.
And it is the first one, and it's Law.
The new style did work. Flair died in the 60s, but United still had Best and Law. Together, the pragmatic and the romantic brought another league championship to Old Trafford. Maybe Paddy Crowand had been right after all. Perhaps they would win the European Cup for Matt. In 1957, United were beaten by Real Madrid in the semi-finals. They were the club Matt had sought to emulate. The Babes never got the chance. In 1968, the new United did. First, they needed a good win at home. They didn't get it.
Making space for Crocker.
We beat them Old Trafford 1-0, which was not a particularly good result. No, thinking that we've got to go to Barnabas and get a result. It was not going to be on the cards.
It was now or never for supporters who dreamt of watching the team abroad.
I remember paying £26 for a 3-day package, which included 2 nights in a hotel in Madrid, ticket for the game. It even had, everybody even had a rosette pinned to the back of the seat on the plane. How quaint.
Bought a cine camera, took film of everyone in the red and white scarves. Max had a flag that his girlfriend had made. It was no ordinary flag. It'd been done in sequins and a lot of time and care taken with it. And in fact, he's still got it to this day.
Bobby Charlton came out, just had a word with him. Paddy Crowand was his usually buoyant self, and had a chat with him.
We went to the ground to see if we could get in. There was absolutely no security at all. We walked in, the groundsman were out mowing the pitch, and no one said a word to us. And we examined the pitch, we walked round, no one bothered. It's tremendous ground, and I remember feeling almost embarrassed that thought they'd been to Old Trafford, and it was just like a chicken run in those days, Old Trafford, compared with what they've got in Madrid.
En el Estadio Santiago Bernabéu, lleno hasta la bandera, van a jugar el Manchester contra el Real Madrid en partido.
So we sat down to watch the match. The atmosphere was absolutely electric, absolutely electric. We were being absolutely annihilated. The floodgates eventually opened. Real Madrid scored twice in about 5 minutes. They were 2-0 up. We were 3-1 down at half-time, and to be quite honest, it should have been 6-1.
So Matt was dumbstruck. I mean, disappointed, dumbstruck that we could actually be in the same situation. Here we are, another semi-final, and we're out again.
Terrible, terrible. I was thinking about it. I was honestly thinking about, suppose that I'm like, you know, 3-1 down. I was thinking as I put 3-1 down, you know, what's going to happen, you know?
En la segunda parte sucede lo increíble.
The Madrid players started to strut. They thought, well, that's the game now, you know. We've psyched them out of it. We've got 3 goals. That's the end of it. And when they had a breather, things started happening for us. You could sense it in our team, you know. Hey, you know, we're getting a bit more time on the ball. We're finding a few more spaces. Chances are coming that weren't there first half. You know, hey, come on, come on. We got a goal, which was not a great goal. David Sandler scored. And suddenly, we're back from the dead. We're out and we're playing.
I made a jog. I started jogging, and Nobby started shouting, "Where the hell are you going?" You know, shouting to me, "Where the hell are you going? You want keeping me back there?" You see.
Our orders were, we'll keep it tight, you know. We'll keep it tight. You know, we're not giving anything away, you know. We're going to keep it tight. And the next thing he's off up the park. Folks, he's gone up the park.
And I thought, if I make a run, I'll make some space to release George. So I carried on jogging. And I finished up just on the edge of the box when George was in the byline.
And I see a red shit and I think, oh, a chance, you know. And then I saw it was Bill Foulkes and I thought, oh, you know.
And that was it.
And he knocked it in the net. Unbelievable. He just went, and suddenly we were back. I could not believe it.
He actually managed to side foot it and it went into the net. Well, we just couldn't believe it. We were absolutely delirious.
I was the only United player there. Incredible. I have scored a few goals before, you know.
Bill Foulkes, a Busby babe and Munich survivor, put United in the final.
We're there. We're there. I'm a Manchester lad. The dream, and I'm part of that dream. And you know, it's there. It's 10 years since Munich, exactly. And I'm part of that dream. You know, it was unbelievable. I remember walking out after the game, and I'd had a bit of a schmozzle with Mancio. We'd had a bit of a do and a bit, and so I got it on the head with a beer bottle, and there was, you know, blood coming down. And I remember saying to Shea Ben, and Matt, just typical of Matt just shoved me on the coach. Forget it, you know, we've beaten them.
And somebody, obviously some Spanish fans, threw an orange box and it bounced off my head, cut my head. But I was so overjoyed I didn't feel it. I just kept putting my hand to my head and there was blood on my hand. But
we went off and went to this real plush club, man in a top hat on the door, and we sat down and 3 beautiful women appeared. I thought, oh, my God, I can't believe this. So I had a dance. I thought, my God, I've scored here. So green, you know, so naive. And after about 20 minutes, they suggested we go to a party. So, oh, great, even better, you know. So got in a taxi and went into this house, and the penny dropped then. I was so green that I hadn't scored particularly. And the price involved was more money than I'd taken the whole trip. Not that I intended going through with it anyway.
The players returned to a city gripped by hysteria. The day of destiny had come. A final against Benfica.
All the old ladies lighting candles, and I think there was special masses, if I can remember right. They wanted United to win. And the build-up to it was absolutely tremendous.
I was working for a security company at the time, and my boss called me into the office. He said, I believe you're going to watch United at Wembley. I said, that's right. He said, well, it's a Wednesday. Are you working? I said, no, I'm not. So he then said, what is more important? Manchester United or your job? And I said, United. And I was shown the door pretty quickly. The following week, I got called back into the office again, go down to Old Trafford. Now, we have got the contract to guard the cup. Would you be one of the guards?
Love to.
Nobby Stiles had his own security job. Take Benfica's star out of the game.
The plan with Eusebio was for Nobby to mark him, and our 10's better than their 10.
If he was getting set to have a shot at goal, no matter where it was, if he was getting shot to have a shot at goal, if you let him have the pull back on it, it was a great chance of a goal.
Eusebio.
because he didn't have a big backlift. He didn't sort of follow. Bobby would follow through on it. You know, he just bang.
This fella was a big, powerful bloke that can move through and shoot from anywhere, you know, awful, feared, absolutely feared by everyone. And he said, not Busby said, Nobby will mark him. He said, Nobby's only 5'4", 5'5", he can't see properly. Nobby's got no chance against him.
100,000 expectant fans packed the stands to see great football. The moment of truth in the battle for mastery of European soccer had arrived. Hard-working Best put the ball out to the left, where Sadler had been playing like a demon. The return centre was a beauty. Charlton headed it home. What a tonic for the fans. The match was by no means won. Benfica pulled off a beauty through Grassa.
The game now turned on one moment, a moment when the world stood still for every United supporter that night. Eusebio escaped.
1-1 and time running out. Now Benfica came away.
I'm looking at Eusebio and I'm looking at the ball. And I went, and as I get there, he's knocked it. And as I look round, he was through all on his own. And I've made a mistake. I have made a mistake.
Stepney was a wonder goalkeeper to stop that rocket from the big cannon boot of Eusebio.
He's coming up to Alec like, and he's saying, like, you know, well done, Alec. It's all right, Alec, thank you, you know, it's one of them, yeah.
And after that, Best got this goal. Brian Kidd flicked a ball onto him, and it was like a lightning. Best, he was through, boom, the ball was in, and the ball, it was trickling in, everyone's, oh, please, you know, everyone was crying and everything. It was unbelievable. And at the end, when they won it, and you saw Matt Busby walking on, it was unbelievable. It was the end. For me, I'd be quite happy then to say, well, that's it, finished now for me. Everything about what happened at Munich and Manchester United being the first English club to go into the European Cup, that's it, finished, as far as I'm concerned.
When we did get back eventually to Manchester, my boss actually said to me, your instructions were not to take your eyes off that cup, but we didn't tell you to be on every single photograph that was printed in every single newspaper throughout the country.